Om Jnanatimirandasya Gyananjana Shalakaya Chakshurunmilitam Yena Tasmai Shri Gurave Namaha. Shri Chaitanya Manobhishtam Stapitam Yena Bhutale Swayam Rupa Kadahmayam Dadati Swapadantikam Vandeham Shri Guru Shri Utapadakamlam Shri Gurun Vaishnavamascha Shri Rupam Sagrajatam Sahagana Raghunatanvitam Tam Sajivam Sadvaitam Savadutam Parijana Sahitam Krishna Chaitanya Devam Shri Radha Krishna Padan Sahagana Lalita Shri Vishakhanvitamascha He Krishna Karuna Sindhu Dinubandhu Jagatpate Gopesha Gopakanta Radhakanta Namostate Tapta Kanchana Gaurangi Radhe Vrindavaneshwari Vrijabhanu Sute Devi Pranamami Hari Priye Panchakalpatarubhyascha Kripa Sindhyoveva cha Patitanam Pavanebhyo Vaishnavebhyo Namo Namaha Namo Vishnupadaya Krishnaprishtaya Bhutale Shrimate Bhaktivedanta Swami Nityanamane Namaste Saraswati Deve Gauravani Pracharine Nirvishesha Shunyavadi Paschatya Deshatarine Jai Shri Krishna Chaitanya Prabhu Nityananda Shri Advaita Gadadhara Shivasadi Gaura Bhaktavrinda Hare Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama 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 Hare Hare. Shurpad ki Jai. Jai. Thank you for joining, everyone. I'm sure there's more devotees coming. Slow start today, but that's okay. We can get started. So yeah, we had last week's session on Yayāti and Devayani, and now this week we'll have the same session again, but through a different words from somebody else's perspective. So let me share my screen, and do we have volunteers to start reading? Canto was first. Sarika Mataji.
Hare Krishna Prabhuji. Week 40, overview of chapter 9.19, King Yayāti Achieves Liberation. Shukadev Goswami said, O Maharaj Parikshit, Yayāti was very much attached to women. In due course of time, however, when disgusted with sexual enjoyment and its bad effects, he renounced this way of life and narrated the following story to his beloved wife. My dear beloved wife, daughter of Shukracharya, in this world there was someone exactly like me. Please listen as I narrate the history of his life. By hearing about the life of such a householder, those who have retired from householder life always lament. While wandering in the forest, eating to satisfy his senses, a he-goat by chance approached a well, in which he saw a she-goat standing helplessly, having fallen into it by the influence of the results of fruitive activities. After planning how to get the she-goat out of the well, the lusty he-goat dug up the earth on the well's edge with the point of his horns in such a way that she was able to come out very easily. When the she-goat, who had very nice hips, got out of the well and saw the very handsome he-goat, she desired to accept him as her husband. When she did so, many other she-goats also desired him as their husband because he had very beautiful bodily structure and a nice moustache and beard, and was expert in discharging semen and in the art of sexual intercourse. Therefore, just as a person haunted by a ghost exhibits madness, the best of the he-goats, attracted by the many she-goats, engaged in erotic activities and naturally forgot his real business of self-realization.
Jai. Thank you.
Thank you.
Gunamai Mataji.
Hare Krishna Prabhuji. When the she-goat who had fallen into the well saw her beloved goat engaged in sexual affair with another she-goat, she could not tolerate the goat's activities. Aggrieved by her husband's behavior with another, the she-goat thought that the he-goat was not actually her friend, but was a hard-hearted and was her friend only for the time being. Therefore, because her husband was lusty, she left him and returned to her former maintenance. Being very sorry, the he-goat, who was subservient to his wife, followed the she-goat on the road and tried his best to flatter her, but he could not pacify her. The she-goat went to the residence of a Brahmana who was the maintainer of another she-goat, and that Brahmana angrily cut off the he-goat's dangling testicles. But the he-goat's request, the Brahmana later rejoined them by the power of mystic yoga. My dear wife, when the he-goat had his testicle restored, he enjoyed the she-goat he had gotten from the well. But although he continued to enjoy for many, many years, even now he is not been fully satisfied. Oh, my dear wife with beautiful eyebrows, I'm exactly like that he-goat, for I am so poor in intelligence that I am captivated by your beauty and have forgotten the real task of self-realization. A
Thank
person
The
who is
chapter is short, Mataji. So
yeah, okay,
if it's
okay, all right.
Yeah. Seema Mataji, and then we can come around. That's okay.
Hare Krishna. A person who is lusty cannot satisfy his mind, even if he has enough of everything in this world, including rice, barley, and other food grains, gold, animals, and women. Nothing can satisfy him, as supplying butter to a fire does not diminish the fire, but instead increase it more and more. The endeavor to stop lusty desire by continual enjoyment can never be successful. In fact, one must voluntarily cease from material desires. When a man is not envious and does not desire ill fortune for anyone, he is equipoised. For such a person, all directions appear happy. For those who are too attached to material enjoyment, sense gratification is very difficult to give up. Even when one is an invalid because of old age, one cannot give up such desires for sense gratification. Therefore, one who actually desires happiness must give up such unsatisfied desires, which are the cause of all tribulations. One should not allow oneself to sit on the same seat even with one's own mother, sister, or daughter, for the senses are so strong that even though one is very advanced in knowledge, he may be attracted by sex. I have spent a full 1000 years enjoying sense gratification, yet my desires to enjoy such pleasures increases daily. Therefore, I shall now give up all these desires and meditate upon the Supreme Personality of Godhead, free from the dualities of mental concoctions and free from false prestige. I shall wander in the forest with the animals. One who knows that material happiness, whether good or bad, in this life or in the next, on this planet or on the heavenly planets, is temporary and useless, and that an intelligent person should not try to enjoy or even think of such things, is a knower of the self. Such a self-realized person knows quite well that material happiness is the very cause of continued material existence and forgetfulness of one's own constitutional position. Hare Krishna.
Okay, thank you. Anybody else like to read?
Hare Krishna, Prabhuji.
Hare Krishna.
Dandavat Pranam. Sukadeva Goswami said, after speaking in this way to his wife, Devayani, King Yayati, who was now free from all material desires, called his youngest son, Puru, and returned Puru's youth in exchange for his own old age. King Yayati gave the southeast to his son Druhu, the south to his son Yadu, the west to his son Turvasu, and the north to his son Anu. In this way, he divided the kingdom. Yayati enthroned his youngest son, Puru, as the emperor of the entire world and the proprietor of all its riches, and he placed all the other sons who were older than Puru under Puru's control. Having enjoyed sense gratification for many, many years, O King Parikshit, Yayati was accustomed to it, but he gave it up entirely in a moment, just as a bird flies away from the nest as soon as its wings have grown. Because King Yayati completely surrendered unto the Supreme Personality of Godhead, Vasudeva, he was freed from all contamination of the material modes of nature. Because of his self-realization, he was able to fix his mind upon the transcendence Parabrahman Vasudeva, as thus he ultimately achieved the position of an associate of the Lord. Hare
Thank
Krishna.
you, Mataji. Subrao Prabhu.
Hare Krishna. When Devayani heard Maharaj Yayāti's story of the she-goat and she-goat, she understood the story, which was presented as if a funny joke.
Sorry, Prabhu, your voice is a bit unclear.
Is this better now?
If you just try.
When Devyani heard Maharaj Yayati's story, the he-goat and she-goat, she understood that this story, which was presented as a funny joke for entertainment between husband and wife, was intended to awaken her to her constitutional position. Thereafter, Devyani, is that better, Prabhu?
We lost your voice, Prabhu.
Thereafter, Devyani, the daughter of Sukracharya, understood that the materialistic association of husband, friends, relatives is like the association in a hotel full of tourists. The relationship of society, friendship, and love are created by the Maya of the Supreme Personality of Godhead. Exactly as in a dream, by the grace of Krishna, Devyani gave up her imaginary position in the material world. Completely fixing her mind upon Krishna, she achieved liberation from the gross and subtle bodies. O Lord Vasudeva, O Supreme Personality of Godhead, you are the creator of the entire cosmic manifestation. You live as the super soul in everyone's heart and are smaller than the smallest, yet you are greater than the greatest. And are all pervading. You appear completely silent, having nothing to do, but this is due to your all pervading nature, your fullness in all opulences. I therefore offer my respectful obeisances to you. Hare Krishna.
Jai, thank you, Prabhu. Okay, so second chapter of the story with Yayati and Devyani. Who would like to, in 5 minutes or less, describe or narrate the story from the previous chapter? Anybody? Gunamayi Mataji.
Hare Krishna. Nobody else is wanting because I'm the one. Okay. So this is like we saw in that in the previous chapter that it's talking about I forgot the lineage, Prabhuji, Nagusha, and then you know how his from his lineage like the king. Uh, so he is the the names are like okay. I can tell you the story. I forgot the
Just
name.
go through the story. Don't worry about the lineage.
Okay, so this Vrishaparva is the king actually, who has a daughter by name Sarmishta, and she is in friend with Shukracharya's daughter. Her name is Devyani. So these two are very close friends, and they have like a group of friends. They are going into the forest, and they were in and playing in the lake of water. And at that time, they see Lord Shiva and Parvati pass by, and so they just come out and pick, you know, out of respect for Shivji, they pick the clothes and they wear that. And by mistake, Sarmishta wears Devyani's clothes. So it creates both the friends, they have a very big fight because of the change in the clothes. And then what happens is like they throw very bad words at each other, especially Devyani is saying that I am from a very, you know, a higher birth. I'm a Brahmana's wife, and I mean daughter, and you are after all just beneath me, and how you can wear. And Sarmishta being on you know, she is from that kingly lineage, so she is getting very offended. She throws her into the well. She removes all her clothes and throws her into the well, and they all leave, actually, the friends. And then comes this the king Yayati, that side. He passes by, and he hears the voice from the well, and he comes and he helps her out of the. He gives her up his upper garment and helps her out of the well. And actually, Devyani proposes to King Yayati, saying that that they need to get married. One thing, because he held her hands, and second thing, that she already has a curse from one of the I forgot the name of the person. So from this person who was studying under her father. So she actually proposed to him, and he refused because he was studying this Mrityu Sanjeevani mantra from her father. And then she curses him, saying that you will forget the mantra, and he curses, saying that you will not be marrying a Brahmana. No, you will marry somebody beneath your birth. And then so she marries him. After marriage, that she convinces her father first, Shukracharya, and once she convinces him, and she cries to him and tells all the story, and he comes to King Vrishaparva, and Vrishaparva, being scared that his guru will curse him, he falls at his feet and he's ready to do whatever he wants actually. And then in this time, Shukracharya is saying, just to satisfy my daughter, whatever she says, you need to accept. So she actually says that Devyani should be her maid servant, and so she and all her friends become her maid servant. But Shukracharya keeps a clause. He tells King Yayati that at no time that you should have any connection with Sarmishta. And they all live together, and Devyani becomes pregnant, and at the same time he meets Sarmishta, and she also becomes pregnant. So when Devyani comes to know, so she's very upset, and she already knows that her father had allowed not to, had already told King Yayati not to do that. So she goes to her father, even though Yayati begs and falls at her feet. And then when he goes there, he becomes an old man by the curse of Shukracharya. So when he comes back, he wants, and then he actually requests the king, Shukracharya, to, because he still wants to enjoy with his wife. So what he can do, and he says if somebody exchanges youth with him, then he can. So he goes to all his sons. Nobody accepts except Puru. So he exchanges youth with Puru, and then he becomes very youthful. And now this. And he's enjoying his life. And we see in this chapter. Right.
Jai. Thank you, Gurumi Mataji. And yeah, such a nice pastime. Last week I was like, Gurumi Mataji remembers different pastimes from the Srimad Bhagavatam, and this week she recites the whole of last chapter, and then she's like, no, I can't do this, No, it's nice. It's nice. No, that's spot on, Now, those who can read and remember what you're reading almost, at the same time, then you see that everything that Gurumi Mataji mentioned is what was mentioned in today's chapter. Just instead of being between Yayati and Devyani, it was between a he-goat and a she-goat, right? So we actually read the same pastime, but from a different perspective, okay? Before we go into the actual story of the he-goat and she-goat, I'm actually going to jump to the end of the chapter, right? End of chapter 19. Because here we find that, yes, it's exactly the same pastime, but because Yayati was speaking to Devyani, so this pastime of the he-goat and she-goat is Yayati speaking to Devyani about the story. But the last few verses of the chapter actually set the mood in how we can come to this pastime as well, right? In verse 26, it's mentioned, Stri pumso snehaveklavyat parihasam iveritam. Right? Translation, the story was presented as if a funny joke for entertainment between husband and wife. Unquote. Now, if we think about the relationship between a husband and wife, it's quite normal and natural that they frolic around, they're frivolous in their dealings, they joke, they tease each other, have a laugh, I mean, of course, there's one part of family of a husband and wife which is full of arguments, but then you've got the other side which is full of love, full of affectionate dealings. And those affectionate dealings can also build a knot in the heart, right, which ties us, right? Now we've got an attachment that builds up. But Yayati was expert, right? He understood his position perfectly. And what he did was he used that same affectionate dealing between a husband and wife, between himself and Devyani, to then impart transcendental knowledge to Devyani instead. So instead of, he could have chose any method to speak to Devyani, right? He could be like, look, we've enjoyed for so many years, I'm not getting any happiness, you're enjoying or not, I don't know, but, Shastras say I should renounce. He didn't do that. He could have done so many different things, but instead he decided to use that same affectionate way to speak to Devyani, to give her transcendental knowledge. And we can think about this in another way, is that when we have affectionate relationships, right, whether it's spouse, children, family, friends, if we build familiarity, then oftentimes we think, okay, we can say things as they are, we can we feel like we have this right to be a bit harsh, to speak harshly, to be forceful in the way we want things to be done. You should put this here, not over there. You should wash the dishes. You shouldn't just leave them in the sink. And sometimes even out of our own loving, affectionate frustration, we also try and push, or in our mood it's encouragement, but we sometimes push the other person to grow in a way that we want them to grow, right? Because we can be sharp, we can be strong, we feel like we can do that. And I'm no exception to this. I know with my close family and friends, I do that as well. But the Bhagavad Gita, there's a verse 17:15, it teaches us the right mood about how we should speak. Yeah. Anudvegakaram vakyam satyam priyahitam chayat svadhyabhyasanam chaiva vanmayam tapa uchyate. Say's translation is that the austerity of speech is to speak words that are truthful, that are pleasing, that are beneficial, that don't agitate the other person, and that are from the Vedic literatures, right? Reciting Vedic literatures, right? So five points are given in Bhagavad Gita 17.15 to showcase to us how we should speak. Yeah. And the principle here is that we want to speak in a way that conforms to the real relationship that we have with the other person, right? There's the external relationship, husband-wife. But the real relationship is that we actually have an attitude of loving servitude towards the other person. Because externally, they're my wife or they're my husband. But the reality is they're actually a part and parcel of Krishna. And how would I speak to another part and parcel of Krishna? It's not by being aggressive. It's not by being forceful. It's by a loving exchange. And here we see that Yayāti adopted that same principle, right? As a husband, he wasn't forceful. As a husband, he wasn't strong. He wasn't harsh. He wasn't going my way or the highway. He actually engaged in an affectionate discussion, conversation with Devyani, using sweet words and giving a story which on one level is just a funny story, right? A he goat, a she goat, talking about two goats falling in love. We don't do that, right? We just talk about it as a joke. It's probably one of those things that people will read on Facebook and then just have a laugh about it and forget it the next day. But we also see the other side, right? And Prabhupada mentions this in one of the purports. He talks about how Devyani was competent, right? Why was she competent? Because she understood what her liberated husband, what Yayāti was actually trying to tell her. It wasn't that she just listened to this funny story from Yayāti and then was just had a laugh with him. She was actually contemplating and thinking about what is Yayāti saying? And she understood that message. In the world, we see that there's this perception of the duty of a husband being just to protect the wife, right? In the material sense. But actually, the scriptures tell us that there's a higher level of protection, which is to deliver the wife, to deliver the dependents. In Canto 5, chapter 5, verse 18, there's a nice verse. Guru na sasyat svajano na sasyat pita na sasyat janani na sasyat devam na tatsyan na patishta sasyan namo chayedya samupeta mrityum. Translation: One who cannot deliver his dependents from the path of repeated birth and death should never become a spiritual master, a father, a husband, a mother, or a worshipful demigod. Unquote. Yeah, this is 5.5.18. So unless we can deliver our dependents from birth and death, we shouldn't take on any position where we become directly responsible for somebody, whether that's a guru, a father, a mother, a husband, or a demigod. Because shastically speaking, when we take responsibility of somebody, it's not just for their material well-being, it's for their spiritual well-being as well. Nowadays, it's unfortunate because we see that in so many cultures, there's this mentality that I'm the man of the house, you know, what I say goes in the house. And they use this male ego, this like superiority complex, that because of traditional history, the man is always the one that directs the house. They use this to go, I'm the man, so follow me. But actually what the scriptures say is that they're really only the man of the house. They're only the real husband if they're actually competent in spiritual knowledge and they're capable of delivering their wife, children, and dependents. Because otherwise, they have, all they are is just a materialistic person that can't really even help deliver themselves, let alone other people. They've not really taken the responsibility properly. So through this allegorical story that Yayati explains to Devyani, he goes through, I mean, it's a very short chapter, right? Like we just read, right? There was only like 5-6 paragraphs compared to like, 10, 20 that we read previously. But through it, he goes through so many deep philosophical points, so many deep spiritual points, all with the mood of explaining the situation to Devyani, but also with the aim of elevating Devyani's consciousness. And simultaneously, Devyani took that on. She was intelligent enough as a wife that she understood, we could say she understood the purport of the story that Yayati was given. Sarika Mataji.
Prabhuji, I'm very sorry to interrupt you. But I've been listening since you started discussing the chapter, and I'm unable to focus for the simple reason that I have so many points to talk about that I am not happy about Yayati giving transcendental knowledge to Devyani. On so many points, I'm not happy with Yayati, indulging in sense gratification for thousands of years. And ultimately, when now Devyani was not indulging in sense gratification, she was dutifully doing what a wife should do, and he was being a kshatriya. That's another point we will discuss later on. I'm going to question that. So he was engaging in all sense gratification, and yes, being very chivalrous and giving sons to Sharmishta and for thousands of years, and taking Puru's youth. So he did everything that he wanted, and at the end, when he was unable to satisfy himself anymore, he just kind of got tired of it all, and then suddenly decided that transcendence is now shining upon him, and he can now give this transcendental knowledge to this dutiful wife who for thousands of years has seen him like the he goat, going about engaging in sense gratification. So I don't follow you at all, and I don't understand what gives him the position to being that kshatriya, Devyani being the Brahmana's daughter, of course, Shukracharya, the Asura leader's daughter, to give that transcendental knowledge. And this high point where Yayati seems to be standing and being just soft spoken to his wife and kind to his wife. So I'm not getting any of that. And it's really upsetting me right now. So sorry I'm upsetting you by interrupting, but I am not agreeing to this Yayati's position at all. And we need to discuss this a little more for me to understand what's the point that I'm missing. Sorry, Prabhuji. Did I overstep?
No, that's fine. That's fine. I'm just gonna mute you because I'm getting feedback. Okay. No, it's a very nice point, and yeah, I should have anticipated this from last week, you know. But okay, so we can see it in multiple different angles, right? So one thing is you could focus on Yayati being the one who's giving transcendental knowledge. But at the same time, we can flip it onto Devyani being such an expert listener that even though Yayati was indulging in all of this, she was so fixed up that she was able to get the essence, the transcendental essence from the pastime. It wasn't that, oh, Yayati was such a bad person, right? When we go on the street, somebody could say something to us and we could be like, it's coming from this dog eater, it's coming from this Chandala. I'm not going to listen to it. Or we could go think about it and go, yeah, he's a low human. He's breaking all the regulated principles. But you know what? He said something that is very valuable. Life can teach us from anyone and anything, right? So we could take that angle from the pastime as well. And that's the angle that I was actually taking, because the next thing I was going to say was that we can then look at the pastime. It sets the mood that we can look at the pastime between the he-goat and she-goat in the mood that Devyani did. Looking at how there's all these material relationships and actually they're just fruitless, right? They're just useless endeavors in the grand scheme of things. They're temporary, they're useless, especially if they're materialistic. As was described, it's described like tourists in a hotel. Okay, so that's one different angle that we can look at it. Secondly, if we look at Yayati and we look at the majority of Srila Prabhupada's disciples, we could say the same thing for them, right? They come from the hippie background, especially the early disciples. They come from a hippie background. So somebody could be like, you used to eat meat, used to do drugs, used to have illicit sex, used to do all these things, gamble, etc. I'm not going to listen to you. But we respect and realize that that was their past. Their past set them up to develop an attachment to the transcendental knowledge. And as soon as they had that attachment to transcendental knowledge, they started speaking. They started preaching. And today, we accept them as Shiksha Gurus, as Diksha Gurus within ISKCON. They are the same personalities that when they come over to our local temple, we will rush to the temple to go and bow down to them, to listen to them sitting on the Vyasasana, and try and get some close association of. And Yayati has the same sort of nature. Okay, it spans 2 chapters in the Bhagavatam, right? But we can see that the same is true for Yayati. He had a past, he had a history where for thousands of years, for that 1,000 years, he was just enjoying. But he realized that all that enjoyment was worthless. And so he's, okay, I want to focus on spiritual life. And yeah, what Subhara Prabhu mentioned in chat is also true. Every sinner has a future and every saint has a past. But the third thing, you mentioned that Devyani was being dutiful. But in the previous chapter, we heard that Shukracharya gave Yayati the boon of swapping his old age for youth because he also saw that his daughter wasn't free from her lustful desires. So how much was it purely out of duty and how much was it because she also wanted to enjoy life? When we think of sex life, okay, I mean, I don't know, but it's very much assumed that it's the guy wanting to enjoy the girl, right? Very much assumed that way. But actually, if you look at biologically, and I'm pretty sure Srila Prabhupada has mentioned this in quite a few places, I don't know if anybody has the references, but actually, biologically, women are more lustful than men, especially during the critical times of the month. So in one sense, you could argue that, you know, if we flipped it, if Yayati's story of how he engaged with, you know, Shramishta, etc., wasn't happening, and for some reason Shukracharya just gave the curse to Yayati, we could flip it very easily and go like, oh, you know, what about Devyani? Like, she's full of so much lust that she wanted her husband to be free of it. So yeah, three different perspectives. Yes, sorry, Kamataji.
Yeah, Prabhuji, here it says that therefore, one who actually desires happiness must give up such unsatisfied desires, which are the cause of all tribulations. One should not allow oneself to sit on the same seat, even with one's own mother, sister, or daughter, for the senses are so strong that even though one is very advanced in knowledge, he may be attracted by sex. And if we see all the Kshatriya kings and the Kshatriya, rulers, it's always been the Kshatriyas who've had many wives. It's never been the woman who's had several relationships or who's had several husbands or who has taken. So, so I'm not getting that point where you say that the woman is more, when every time it is the man who is directed, So, I'm unable to understand that bit.
We'll take them
Where,
in turn if
yes.
that's okay. So here we have to understand the context as well, yeah? So back in those days, it was very prominent that Kshatriyas would fight, yeah? Fighting means bloodshed, fighting also means death on the battlefield. Historically, it was only ever men that went to war, right? The women, the children, the elderly would stay behind. So what that ended up meaning for society is that where, even nowadays, it's not an equal fit. I don't know what the percentages are, but back in the day, the percentage of women to the percentage of men was very skewed. There were a lot more women in society than there were men, because the men, especially the Kshatriyas, would go fight. A lot of them would die. And we also understand from the scriptures that women are meant to be sheltered. So when they're children, when they're young, sheltered by father. But then where do they get shelter when they reach that age of like the middle age? And what about when the father's left? So what used to happen is the Kshatriyas would then take on many, many wives. We see even Krishna took on 16,108 wives. But the Kshatriyas take on many wives with the mood of being equal to all of them as much as possible. In the case of Krishna, he could give 24/7, 365 days to each of them equally. But one man can't do that because we're, not Krishna, right? So Kshatriyas would still have many wives, but the mood is that you take on wives and give them equal opportunity. Like each wife should be treated equally. Yeah. So that's one part. So that's the wives part, right? So historically there would be less men. So therefore, in order to give the protection, the shelter to the woman, they would marry multiple women. But the other part is also kind of linked to it, is that we saw in this pastime as well. When a woman marries, because of that same situation that, part of it, that there's so few men, a lot of the sakhis and the maids would go with the woman to then be associated to the Kshatriya king. And this happens with Kshatriyas. I've not heard it with Brahmanas, etc., but I'm happy to stand corrected on that. But yeah, even there we see that, okay, there's these maidservants and stuff, but then it's almost expected that they're treated not as principal wives, but they're still treated that they've gone with the wife, with that all opulence is coming for the king to then enjoy the opulence. So arguably, yes, it's not ideal, but given the context, we can understand that also. So nowadays, if your husband is using this as an explanation to go, oh, I should go marry 5 other wives, that's not the case. Contextually, this happened in history. But yeah, Subhara Prabhu is
Thank you.
given. Let me just paste it here. Subhara Prabhu found the verse actually that this is referenced by Prabhupada. 3:23:44 in the purport, Srila Prabhupada says, it is understood that the sexual appetite of a woman is 9 times greater than that of a man.
But it's lovely to see that despite having that, they still can be quite chaste. You know, which is remarkable. Which is remarkable.
Yeah, and
Prabhuji,
Rachana
yeah, sorry, just my take is like, so whatever we are in, maybe we are enjoying this sense gratifying life or whatever, but at least there should be a point where we think about the Lord and just move on, you know. Maybe we had so many sinful life, whatever we have done in this life, you know, materially. But then we have to go to that point where we think that, okay, all this nonsense is enough, and you know, that point should come. At least, you know, I feel this is what the lesson I learned from this Yayāti pastime.
Yeah, that's
Some
exactly
hope giving,
right.
maybe. Yeah.
Okay, we'll take Seema Mataji and then we'll go back to the pastime.
Prabhuji, nowhere here mentioned that how the transformation got the Yayati suddenly from the sense gratification to the transcendental knowledge, how that transformation has happened.
So we'll touch on it briefly, but in one sense, it's the fact that you keep enjoying, you keep trying to enjoy, but how much enjoyment is there in the material world? We see even the materialists in the world, they endeavor to enjoy, but what they endeavored for doesn't give them the enjoyment, so they think it's not this, it's the next thing. It's the next thing, it's the next thing. But eventually somebody who has a basic understanding of some sort of spirituality, they'll understand eventually and come to the point that, you know what, it's because I'm trying to endeavor for material enjoyment. And that's why raising Krishna conscious children is such a massive service. It's such a great service, because even if that child moves away from spirituality, you know, it happens. They leave the Krishna conscious process. 10, 15, 20 years down the line, 30 years down the line, they will come back. Not because you force them to come back, but because they have tasted the material world and they're practicing chewing the chewed and realizing that there's no freshness in that chewing. And so the fact that that foundation in spirituality was set from a young age means that they can then come back and realize that they at least have an acknowledgement that there is another life outside of materialism. So yes, let us go back to the pastime. But no, thank you for that, because I'm sure it wasn't just yourself, Sarika Mataji, that was kind of feeling a bit agitated about this situation with Yayāti. So yeah, I'll take that afterwards, Subhara Prabhu, if that's okay. But yeah, I'm just conscious of time as well. Okay, so we're talking about how Devayani was fixed up. She was intelligent as a wife, right? And she took on Yayati's words despite Yayati's situation. Okay. And then we I slightly touched on this idea of how family, friends, etc. are just tourists in a hotel. And this comes from this chapter as well, in verses 27 to 28, where it said, thereafter Devayani, the daughter of Shukracharya, understood that the materialistic association of husband, friends, and relatives is like the association in a hotel full of tourists. And so when we go through this story of the he-goat and she-goat, we can understand that all of our material relationships in the world, right, whether it's material relationships in ignorance, passion, goodness, of society, friendship, love, nationalism, religion, they're all creations of Maya, actually. They all build an attachment which actually impedes our spiritual growth. It impedes our path to self-realization. It impedes on our ability and our capacity to engage in Krishna consciousness, in service of the Lord as extensively as possible. And when we look at even the senior devotees, we see that their focus is on expanding as much service as they can. Yes, they have their duties, but all that enjoyment that they have in the name of duty, they retract from because they want to engage it in Krishna's service, right? And this understanding, these last few verses of understanding how Devyani took these words from Yayati, sets the scene, it sets the context, it sets the background to understand how we can take this story of the he-goat and she-goat. Not just from Yayati, but from anyone and anything in the world. I write blogs from time to time, and I'll share this on the group, but one of the blogs I have is actually quite a few teachings just from an ant who happened to be in our house. In the UK, we get ants and stuff, but usually we don't have them roaming around the house. And it's very rare to see an ant who's carrying a leaf in the house. But we can learn so much even from an ant, you know? I'll share that if somebody reminds me, please do. But yeah, so we can understand that just as Devyani was plucking out the transcendental wisdom, we should also do that. Or as Maharaj would say, we should mine the jewels, right? From anyone, everywhere. Jewels, where do jewels come from, right? If you look at pictures from like mines, etc., it's such a notorious place. Nobody really wants to be there. But that's where you get the treasure. So even if somebody who is on one side holding a cigarette in their mouth, on the other side holding a KFC, a McDonald's, or whatever it is, and on the other side looking at women on the street, even if somebody like that says something to us, we should take, okay, is there something transcendental? Is there something that we can take from this piece of these words that they've given us? Reject what they are practicing and accept the wisdom that is beneficial for us. So then, yeah, as Yayati then starts to narrate the story, the first thing he actually says is Dhira Yasyanu Shochanti Vane Grama Nivashina. This is from verse 2. He says, translation, by hearing about the life of such a householder, those who have retired from householder life always lament. Unquote. This is from verse 2. Here, Yayati's already started to indicate to Devyani that actually my mood now is that of a renounced life. I'm starting to renounce and thinking of accepting Vanaprastha, basically, right? He's enjoyed for 1,000 years, and now he's explaining to Devyani, I know we've enjoyed, but I'm starting to think about Vanaprastha. I'm starting to think about this idea of pulling ourselves away from sense enjoyment. And Vanaprastha doesn't just mean to abstain from sexual affairs, right? There's a misconception that, oh, because we're not engaging in sex life, we're actually practicing Vanaprastha or whatever. It actually means that we not just retract ourselves from sexual engagements, not just retract ourselves from getting too involved with family, etc., but it means that we actually now focus on the highest goal of life. We focus our existence on molding it in a way which takes us closer and closer and closer to being purely spiritual in our engagements. And when somebody's going through that phase of life, it's a change, right? Somebody's voluntarily taking up a change, or sometimes involuntary, but yeah, let's just stick with voluntary. It's quite natural that they will reflect back on their time, right? Even as normal people, when we're growing through life, we think back about 5 years, 10 years, what happened 5-10 years ago. And then we have a couple of moods that we can take it, right? One extreme is that we're like, oh my gosh, it was such a lovely time. I wish I could have those days back. Because we're seeing that time as a time that we enjoyed, a time that was supportive and beneficial for us. But as we advance in our spiritual realization, as we advance in that mood of cultivating spiritual consciousness, we come to this mood of seeing that time that we were in Grihastha life, that householder life, as what's described as andakupam, a dark well. Why? Because it actually took us away from cultivating spiritual consciousness. So one mood is that we look at it as purely, oh my gosh, it was such an amazing time. I wish I could have those days back. I wish that my bones and my body supported, that I could bend like all the way down, pick up things from the floor, and enjoy life to the max. But as we progress in spiritual life, we look back and think, I've wasted so much of my time. And so that's why it's important that I appreciate that. I think most of the devotees on this call are probably married or, looking beyond Grihastha ashram. But that's why it's important that anybody who enters family life or looking to enter householder life, they enter with a spiritual mindset. They enter with the mood that we're going to enter the Grihastha ashram, not for sense enjoyment, but to come together to practice spiritual life and to help each other grow in spiritual ways. Because then it allows the Grihastha ashram to actually, or the householder life, to be an ashram which is supportive of our spiritual growth. But naturally, because we're all conditioned, it's not a perfect Grihastha ashram unless you happen to be so advanced in your spiritual life. And so there's still always an element of enjoying. And then you see that there's many who are very serious and sincere about spiritual life. They don't just have the entry plan for Grihastha ashram. They're also preparing for the exit plan of Grihastha ashram, which is Vanaprasth. They're thinking of, okay, I'm going to enter Grihastha ashram, and then I'm going to have finances set. I'm going to think about how to have children set, everything set so that I can exit Grihastha ashram when the time is right. Otherwise, what happens? Oh, I'm 50, 60, my children are still not married, house is still not free, still paying a mortgage, got all these things to do. I can't leave family life yet. Couple more years, couple more years. But those couple of years never come. And so in this way, one should look to cultivate the attitude as they go through Grihastha ashram, as they mature in spiritual life, to think about how am I going to exit Grihastha ashram now? Vanaprasth. And then when you achieve a state of maturity in Vanaprasth ashram, then it's quite natural for the senior devotees, for the Maharajas, for Guru maybe even, to encourage you along the sannyas ashram. But it becomes natural. People will think, oh my gosh, renouncing the material world, but it becomes a natural step because you're going in that direction. Nobody gets forced into it, as far as I know. So then Yayāti starts talking about this story about the he-goat and the she-goat, right? He talks about how the he-goat is actually searching for food, for sense enjoyment, while the she-goat is stuck in a well, right? Hopelessly, it's described, hopelessly stuck in a well. And just that first part, I mean, it's not mentioned per se, but it's such an interesting way to bring the he-goat in, right? The he-goat is searching for food. Now, I don't know if there's a Gujarati or Hindi saying, but I'm sure there is, but in English, we have this phrase that the way to a man's heart is through his stomach. And this same thing is used with the he-goat. The he-goat is searching for food, and in searching for food, he found a she-goat, right? Food, that desire for food led this he-goat to the she-goat, which attracted his heart. right? Yeah, I just found it an interesting sort of way to depict Yayāti in this situation because of the pastime. And on the other hand, we see that it's described that the she-goat was stuck in the well because of the results of her own fruitive actions. And this goes to what we were talking about earlier and what Prabhupada has mentioned as well, is that women should be protected. Women should never be independent. Because we see that when a woman is independent, then one, it's actually not a Vedic thing. Even men, for that matter, yes, are not meant to be independent. You see that there's brahmacharya ashram, there's grihastha ashram, there's vanaprastha ashram, and there's sannyasa ashram. But in all four of those, the men are under a shelter, and then you have the equivalent for the female who is also under shelter. In the brahmacharya ashram, the men are under shelter of guru. In grihastha ashram, the man is still under shelter of guru, but under the protection of the association with a wife. In vanaprastha, there's a transition from being under the protection of wife to being focused on being under the protection of the Supreme Lord, but it's under the direction of Guru. And then in sannyasa ashram, you're under full shelter of the Lord, but you're under the protection of the fact that you have a position in society that even one wrong thing you do, you lose everything, right? Which is why fall down from a sannyasi is depicted to be so much more dangerous than a fall down from a grihastha. So even men are not meant to be independent. But there's so much emphasis placed on women because nowadays we see, and even in Prabhupada's time, that this idea of women equating to men, like, oh, men can do all this, women can too. And therefore it's built that mentality of being an independent woman, living alone, and all these things. But it's not Vedic. And it definitely doesn't follow Varnashram because you're not in the Brahmacharini ashram at that point. You're not under the protection of Grihastha ashram, whether it's your parents or spouse. You haven't taken Vanaprastha, and you're not a sannyasi. So yeah, actually, Srila Prabhupada mentions how actually such women are actually struggling to exist, right? Because they're not built actually. Women aren't built to kind of fight material nature in that way. Man and woman together fight material nature. Just one energy can't do it. So yeah, so with this attraction between the he-goat, right, and the she-goat, then, you know, what do we see? That because the she-goat is unsheltered, right, she's stuck in a well, the he-goat is like, this is my chance, right? Let me try and attract the she-goat's attention. And in the same way we see in the world how a man gets enamored by a woman's beauty. And when he does that, when he gets enamored, what happens? He goes through so much hardship in life, right? To try and please her, to try and please the family, etc. They strive for a nice job, a good career, a big car. They want a nice house. They wear fashionable clothes, all to attract their opposite gender afterwards. So much endeavor is placed in economic development for the woman. Otherwise, when you're single, like, you don't need any of that. You're just happy living as you are. A woman in Sanskrit is called Stri. Yeah, Stri. We've all probably heard of it. But Stri also has the meaning of, the literal meaning of expansion. So a Stri, when a Stri comes into a Purusha's life, right, when a woman comes into the life of a man, it creates expansion. And for most in the world, because of the materialistic mindset, that expansion becomes entangling because it's about expanding the material life, material existence. But for a spiritualist, they're looking for a Stri who will expand the spiritual life. Right? So a Stri being termed as expansion isn't inherently bad. It just depends on what consciousness that expansion is in. Well, is it material consciousness of the expansion, or is it spiritual consciousness being expanded? But in this example, the expansion was very much that of a materialist, right? The he-goat, what did he start doing? He started using his own horns to dig to get the she-goat out of the well. So much labor was involved in doing that, all out of attraction for the opposite gender. And when she comes out, then what do? Out of that attraction, they start engaging with each other. They start enjoying in sexual relationships, in erotic activities, as the phrase is used. The he-goat worked so laboriously for the she-goat, but still we hear that the he-goat was not satisfied. And so what does he do? Well, he wants to try and expand his satisfaction. He's thinking, one she-goat isn't enough. Let me have many she-goats. And in that way, he got so absorbed in trying to satisfy this mood of enjoyment that he forgot his real business of self-realization. Now, on the one hand, we could say that this part of the story where the he-goat has gone and searched for other she-goats to enjoy with is depicting exactly what we'd probably think is that, oh, a man is so lusty that he goes and cheats on his wife. But the other way we could see it is that sex life is just one mood of lust. There's a whole world of lust which is entangled in just enjoying material life. You go down the street, you look at a sari in the shop, and you're like, I want that sari. If it's for Krishna, that's not lust because you're thinking about service. But at least the Matajis I know, it's not usually, Krishna's not the, sorry, Radharani or Krishna aren't the first ones in their mind. It's usually, that would look good on me, no? So many things like this, we think, okay, lust means just sex life, but lust means actually all the attractions that entangle us more and more in the world, right? All the facilities that we're after to enjoy in the world, that's actually the real lust. And that's the other way we can see it, is that if you got that sari, right? I'm using feminine examples because all the devotees who have kept the camera on are just females. But yeah, so we could look at the sari. We can even purchase a sari. But is that going to satisfy our appetite? No, because the next day you go down the same shop, you pass the same shop, you see a new sari and you're like, I don't have this sari. I want that sari now. Then we go into the shop and we're like, okay, enough saris, But then you pass the jewelry shop and you're like, oh, that looks nice. That bangle would look good on me. Those jhumkas, those earrings, they'll look nice on me. Like this, we keep expanding because we go, okay, if I get this one thing, I'll be happy. You get it, but then that's not enough anymore. You want something else, and each time you want something new and new and new because what you got didn't actually satisfy the real desire in the heart. You're after happiness, but it didn't actually give you the happiness that you really want. And if I use other examples, right? We go, I have one car. But if I get two, I'll be happy. I have a nice job. But if I get a promotion, it'll bring me so much more prosperity. I have a 2-bed apartment. But I just passed this 3-bed bungalow. And if I just get that, then I'll be content. Then I'll give up everything. Then I'll do bhakti. But it never happens because we keep going, okay, 3-bed bungalow. Now we've seen a 4-bed bungalow. And my friend has that 4-bed bungalow. Now I want to get a 4-bed bungalow because it looks so nice. And like this, the he-goat was endeavoring to gratify his senses, right? His bodily senses, that he forgot that the main principle was that he's only searching for happiness, and that happiness is found in the path of self-realization. A householder has a concession for enjoying and gratifying the material senses, but under rules and regulations, right? It's not a license to just go and enjoy life, whatever that enjoyment may be. It's not a license to enjoy. It's not that, oh, I'm a family person, therefore I must have a big house, I must have a bungalow, I must have 3 cars in my driveway. Householder life means that we're coming together to be in an ashram, to be in a stable situation, to progress in spiritual life. And if that means that for stability we need 2 cars or 3 cars instead of the 1 car, then that's a different story. Then that is understanding, contemplating on the material aspects and using them for service. But if it's just like, we're a householder, we need 3 cars, everybody else has 3 cars, we also must need 3 cars. This in English we call it keeping up with the Joneses mentality, keeping up with those around us. But that's not grahastha. That's trying to enjoy the senses, actually. So we can see it that sense enjoyment in the name of duty binds us more. But if we're dutifully fulfilling our responsibilities in the name of purification, in the name of expanding our services, that is liberating for us, right? Enjoying the senses in the name of this is my duty binds us. But when we're going through the motions of fulfilling our duties, the real duties of the Grihastha ashram or the Brahmacharya ashram, whichever ashram it is, in the mood that this will purify me, then that liberates us because we're not attached to the enjoyment that we get out of it. We're attached to the fact that it's supporting our process for spiritual elevation. And then we see that, as is normal, the she-goat didn't like the fact that the he-goat was expanding his enjoyment through other she-goats. So she started to run back to her previous maintainer, just as Devani was running back to Shukracharya. And along the way, the he-goat tried to stop her, just as Yayāti tried to stop Devayani. But she was fixed up. She wanted to go home means she wanted to go home. She's packed her bags. She's done everything. She's not going to stop now just because her husband said, I love you. She said she was going to go home, so she went home. And this home wasn't going back home to back to Godhead. It was going home to her previous maintainer, to her Maika, as we would say. And it's interesting who this maintainer is described as. Dvija Kaschid Ajaswami. This maintainer is described as a Brahmana who's maintaining another she-goat. Shukracharya is figuratively described as the husband of another she-goat, meaning he's a he-goat himself. Now, I coined this verse. Now, people probably know the original verse, but I coined this verse. Kibra vipra kibanyasi shudra kenane yai ajaswami hoye say basta hoye. Right? The original verse is yai Krishna tattvaveta say guru hoye. Whether one is a Brahmana, a sannyasi, a Shudra, whatever he is, if he understands the science of Krishna, Krishna Tattvaveta, say Guru hoye, then he becomes a spiritual master. Then he's eligible to be a spiritual master. But with this pastime, what I'm saying is, Yai Ajaswami hoye, say basta hoye. If one is maintaining a she-goat, then he's just another he-goat. Right? Which is what Shukracharya is. And actually, if we look at the term Shukracharya, Shukra is actually a word for termed as semen, right? You could translate as semen. And Acharya, we know Acharya means like the expert, right? The expert guru. So even in Shukracharya's name, he's been termed as somebody who is expert in family affairs. This is the Sanskrit language for us, you know. We just call him a Shukracharya. Shukracharya. He's the guru of the demons. But Shukracharya, if we break it down, it means he's the expert at family life. And if we look at the pastimes in the Srimad Bhagavatam with Shukracharya, all his mystic powers, what does he use them for? Just sense enjoyment. He's never used those powers to elevate consciousness to come to God consciousness or Krishna consciousness. Because he's also attached to the mood of family life, attached to the sex enjoyment. And what does this Brahmana do? This Brahmana then cuts off the testicles of the he-goat, and then he gives the testicles back. Right? Why? Because from the pastime with Devyani, we understand that he's looking at the enjoyment of the she-goat, actually. For the pleasure of the she-goat, he gave the testicles back. And even though the he-goat goes through many years of enjoying, still not satisfied. And this comes to what we were mentioning earlier with one of Sirika Mataji's points earlier, is that even though Yayāti spent so many years enjoying, he was never satisfied. And that mood of trying to enjoy the world is Maya's biggest trap, because it becomes very difficult to overcome. Even with great knowledge, right? Somebody who's very learned in the scriptures, even for somebody who has practiced thousands of years of austerity, thousands of years of penances, we see that there is a pastime in the scriptures where they have become fallible in this idea of sex attraction. Whether it's seeing two fishes enjoy, whether it's seeing some low castes, enjoying with a prostitute, whether it's just seeing a woman when you've never seen a woman in your life. No matter how learned we are, no matter how great we think we are, sex attraction is a real danger. And the worst part is that any sort of material enjoyment, especially sex life, if you think, okay, I'm getting attracted by it, let me just enjoy this once. But then that lustful mentality impels us more and more to endeavor more and more for it. It becomes a toxic cycle for us, actually. Until and unless we regulate or come away from it, it becomes a toxic cycle. And so maybe some of us on this call, I'm not necessarily thinking sex life only, but maybe some of us on this call get so absorbed in some sort of material enjoyment, whether it's shopping, whether it's watching TV, whatever it is. The first thing we should think of is, am I indulging in it? And if I am, then try to regulate it. And then try to bring it to the next step, which is to let it go. But one can only let it go, right? If we realize how to let it go. Because we can artificially give something up, but then a couple of months later we get agitated by it again and then we go back to it. In the Bhagavad Gita, we know that lust is described as one of the gates to hell, right? So if we don't deal with it properly, then it just gives us a downward spiral. And the way to deal with it properly is given to us in the Bhagavatam, in the scriptures. And specifically, I talk about Canto 10, Chapter 3, Verse 39. 10.3.39. Bhaktim param bhagavati pratilapya kamam hridrogamashvapahinotyachiryena dhiraha. Translation: if one becomes Krishna conscious, then he can give up this heart disease. Otherwise, this disease of lusty desires will continue, and one cannot have peace in his mind. Unquote. Any sort of lusty desire, whether it's, again, sex life, whether it's shopping life, whether it's TV life, whether it's gossip, whatever it is, it agitates our mind and we can never be peaceful. The modes of ignorance and passion never allow us to be at peace. But here we see that the only real way to be peaceful is to become Krishna conscious. And then we read how the lustful desires are described like, satisfying the lustful desires is described as butter to fire, right? Because the idea is that instead of putting the fire of lust out, by engaging in those activities, it's just agitating and expanding the fire more and more. If you add butter to fire, what happens? The fire gets more fuel to burn. But we have to take away the fire. We have to starve the fire from its fuel. Then the fire can slowly go away. Or better still, we can pour water on the fire, depending what fire it is. Who knows how we can pour water on the fire? Mangalarti. Samsara dava nalilita loka tranaya karunya ghana ghanatvam, right? It's described that the spiritual master is actually carrying the clouds of water, right, to pour out the blazing fire of material existence. Why? Because they're connected with the original rain cloud, Krishna. The rain cloud looking boy is providing the rain cloud for the guru to put out the blazing fire of our material existence. So it's not enough to just starve the fire, because in starving the fire, we'll feel like, oh, I want to give the fire more. I want to give the fire, but we're withholding ourselves. But instead, what we should do is, I'm going to starve the fire, but I'm also going to pour water on the fire by engaging in spiritual activities. Because if we don't do that, right, if we decide that, okay, I'm not going to give up my sense enjoyment, I'm going to remain attached, then all that hankering that's going to build up, all the hankering that we get involved in, is just going to keep building and building, like how it did for Yayāti. He kept wanting more and more and more enjoyment. But when he got the old age, when Shukracharya cursed him with old age, he was incapable of giving it up. He was like, I'm not done yet. But life for all of us, right? We're not going to get a boon that, oh, when you hit old age, you can't go to the park anymore. You can't play football with your friends anymore. You can't enjoy with the opposite gender anymore. Nobody's going to come to you and like, oh, Gunamai Mataji, would you like the spoon that you can be young again? Nobody's going to come to you. You're going to have to accept it. But you'll be incapable of accepting it if you keep engaging in sense gratification, because you're going to keep wanting more. But on the other hand, if one becomes Krishna conscious, then the lustful hankering, right, in the initial stages, it's still there. We still think, oh, I want to go and do this. I want to go and use all of my bank balance in shopping. But if we engage in Krishna's service, then all of that lustful hankering becomes controlled, it becomes tamed. And then it's described that we can experience equanimity, right? We can experience balance in our mindset. Happiness and distress doesn't disturb us anymore because we're fully happy in all situations. Because we're connected, we understand that the real happiness, the real bliss comes from the Lord of the world, not the world itself. Right? And in that way, then Yayāti is explaining to the Vyani how all the material endeavors, whether they're pious or impious, whether they elevate one to the heavenly planets or degrade one to the hellish planets, they're all temporary and useless. And so actually they're of no real value. So then we read that Yayāti then hands over the kingdom to his 5 sons, and then he himself is ready to be fully surrendered. And I'm just conscious of time, want to leave devotees time to talk. But we read in some of the verses how Yayāti was immediately able to cut off his attachment to sense enjoyment. And we might think how did he do that? How is that? That's not possible for me. I try that, but I just keep going back, you know? But we understand that it's the sincerity actually of Yayāti that helped him achieve that. In the Bhagavad Gita, we read the verse that to the extent that we surrender to Krishna, to that extent Krishna helps us. And if our sincerity is one-pointed, that now I'm done with everything material, I understand that there's no happiness in the material world that is of benefit. I just want the happiness attained by the lotus feet of the Lord. Then Krishna will help us by cleansing our contamination. He will take over our life and he'll help us actually achieve him. And then in that way, we wrap up the story because we go back to the beginning of what I was sharing about how Devyani took all of this from Yayāti and went, you're right, Yayāti, I will also follow suit. And she also focuses on completely giving herself to the process of spiritual life. So yes, I shall end there. If devotees have anything to say, questions, more questions, comments, please do. Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. Shubhapad ki jai, Yayāti Maharaj ki jai. Sarika Mataji.
Yes, Prabhuji, thank you so much for clearing our doubts. It was a very nice session, and a big takeaway for me from this session is like it's mentioned here when Shukdev Goswami says, O King Parikshit, Yayāti was accustomed to it, but he gave it up entirely in a moment, just as a bird flies away from the nest as soon as its wings have grown. So I really like that. And that also, I'm linking it to Ajamil. Like, although Ajamil was delivered in a moment, he did it unknowingly by calling out to his son. But because of his past, Sukriti, he got an opportunity to be liberated. And here, Yayāti, so this also gives us so much of hope that our Supreme Lord Krishna is so merciful that he will let us, if we are prepared and ready, give it up all in a moment. So thank you so much. Hari Bol.
Jai. Thank you,
Thank
Mataji.
you.
Anybody
Anybody
else? So, Prabhu, do you still have the question or comment from before?
Yeah, Hare Krishna Prabhu. Am I audible?
Yeah, this is better now. Yeah.
I changed my laptop actually. So, usually people, we refer chewing the chewed, right? The verse, famous verse in Bhagavatam. I mean, if you look at it, when you are in the process of chewing it, you don't realize that you've already chewed it, right? You're in a deep sense of kind of an ignorance. Oh, I'm relishing it. So, I mean, in that context, I remember like we all have tasted sugar cane, right? Sugar cane initially when you like crunch, I mean, bite it, you suck the juice out of it. Whatever comes out of it, that's a waste. We're not talking about that chewing the chew, right? If you take, I mean, nobody will do that. It's abominable. But if you take that, there is not going to be any juice. Like in that context, I'm just thinking, what is this? We don't know actually. It's been already chewed, isn't it? So why do we do it again and again? I mean, I know it's due to ignorance, but how do we relate this?
So I'm not sure if I quite understood that, Prabhu. Are you saying that when we're doing the chewing, we don't actually realize that we've already chewed it? Or is it just in general that it's been chewed already before?
When you're, I mean, it's an experience, right? When you're chewing it, the experience you're going through, you're living in that moment, you are relishing it, enjoying it, and all those things. But even though you've done it already, you are doing a fresh chewing. You're not taking the old chewed, discarded part, right? So you're doing a fresh piece of sugarcane or something like that, right?
Okay.
Is
Yes.
that
Okay.
how
Yeah.
you
Now
understand?
I understand. Yeah. Thank you, Prabhu. Thank you. So it's interesting, right? When we think of chewing the chewed, you're right. Like, I think the mentality for a lot of us is that I'm doing the chewing and then I'm doing the chewing the chewed. But from the scriptures and even life in general, we understand that there's three categories of people or three types of learning that we can go through. Yeah. One type of learning is seeing others go through something and learning what to do, what not to do from that, just by seeing somebody else. Oh, sorry. The first one is hearing about it, right? So when we read the books, when we read history, or if we bring it to Krishna consciousness, when we read the scriptures, we can say that that is one aspect of chewing because we're going through the experience. It's not that I'm going through the experience, but I'm hearing about somebody else's experience. That's one type of learning. The second type of learning is by seeing others do it. When we go around, when we can just turn on the news, and I'm sure that in the space of 1 month, at least there's a couple of suicides that will come up in the news or the newspaper. There'll be some celebrities that are going into intoxication, etc., right? So there we're seeing that, oh, these people are attaining the highest perfection, so-called perfection in material life, but even they're not happy. So that's the second type of learning, that we're seeing others around us, or even family members, etc., friends, go through these experiences and like, I didn't give them what they wanted. It's not that these personalities endeavored to become drug addicts from being in the showbiz industry. They went to the showbiz industry for whatever reason, and they didn't get what they actually wanted, so they're like, my life is wasted. And then the third type of learner is one who has to go through the experience themselves to learn, right? So we can see chewing the chewed in three aspects. One is chewing through reading the scriptures, seeing the examples of the personalities in the scriptures or in history. The second chewing is through seeing others doing the chewing. And then the third is us having that experience in past where we've done the chewing. But the problem is that despite reading about it, despite seeing others go through it, and despite going through the experience ourselves, we still then do the chewing the chewed. So I don't know if that helps and answers, because yeah, I know there's often the thought that I'm going through chewing the chewed, but it's not just about me. It's about the experience that we hear or see as well.
Thank you, Prabhuji. Hare Krishna. That was excellent explanation.
Jai Hare Krishna. Rachana Mataji?
Hare Krishna. I want to just respond to Subharao Prabhu's message. So the way I understand it is that, the example of like say a drunkard, the first time he takes the drink, he has the type of pleasure that he feels, or anytime we do any activity for the first time, the pleasure we feel in that first experience will never be the same as what we experience in the second, third, fourth time. That is a given. That's why what happens ends up happening with people who become addicts is that they have to do the same thing a lot, to feel the same high they felt the first time, And so the problem happens when people have to go cold turkey on something, Say a drug addict is told, now go cold turkey today, you're not going to do this. They don't allow their body and mind to recover from the de-addiction. You understand? So that is what is needed. When we want to give up a bad habit, we have to allow our body and mind to completely process the de-addiction. And we have to go through that change and be ready for the new normal. You see, most people, they don't allow themselves to come to that new normal. And so they keep coming back to their old habits, because they're not able to do that clear cut, like that make that real break, that they don't go cold turkey. They should go cold turkey, if they have the courage, I'm saying. That's my little input.
Okay. Thank you. Apologies if I got the wrong end of the stick, Suvarapro, because yeah, that's equally a very valid, relevant point.
Yeah, that's very true. Actually, thank you for Mataji also, Rachna Mataji also. Many times the issue is I don't even acknowledge that I have a problem that has to be resolved. Right? We are in so much of stupidity or ignorance. That is why we need right kind of association and sincerity of prayer, right? That helps. Hare Krishna. Thank you.
Okay, yeah, association and prayers, definitely, bro. Even when you look at the example that Rachna Mataji gave, usually you have rehabilitation centers. And what do, right? It's drunkards coming together, encouraging each other, and even ex-drunkards encouraging those who are trying to come away from being drunk. And they're supporting each other. That association is key to help them get out of that. So yeah, a very nice point. Seema Mataji.
Hare Krishna, Guruji. So from last week and this week, what I understood is that, can we take it as an 18th chapter as in self, it is like an sense gratifying person, and 19 as in self-realized person. We can take it like that. And from 18, that he was doing so many things for sense gratifying, and even he is exchanging his old age with his son and everything. But in the 19th chapter, when he got pissed off with all those things, thinking that he won't be get satisfied, then taking the shelter of the lotus feet of the Lord, he realized that it is all waste, no matter in this world or the heavenly planets. So it's better to renounce everything and just go away. And we can even compare this with our personal examples, that before getting into this Krishna consciousness, how we were and how we are, to some extent what things have been changed. So this we can just relate with ourselves also.
Okay,
Probably
yes,
what we were doing earlier, to not that extent, might be I have overcome with that, but to some extent I can able to control it. It will take time to come to that level of Yayāti. I don't know how many lifetimes take, but I thought I can just connect like this. I may be right or wrong. I am not sure about that. And one more question, Prabhu, you have explained about the definition of Stri, right? That is expansion. So that is the nature of Stri, right? The expansion. So how can they change their nature? Can they change their nature? Like we want, like you given so many examples of the sari, jewelry and everything. That is for everyone. So how can we change it?
No, like I said,
That's their nature, right?
So expansion is their nature, but that whether it's material expansion or spiritual expansion is not the nature. That's the choice.
Okay.
Right? So this is why Grihastha ashram is such a good, safe ashram, if it's a Grihastha ashram, because you can support each other to grow spiritually, or you can support each other to fall down, right? But it depends on what sort of expansion each one is providing for the other person. So instead of seeing expansion as being an inherently bad thing, we can look at expansion as being this point of, okay, we've come together. It means there's going to be a house. It means there's going to be children. It means there's going to be opulence in the house. But let all of that be utilized in service of the Lord and not in service of our senses. Expansion has to take place, but expansion can be for Krishna's enjoyment, not for our enjoyment.
Okay, Prabhuji. Thank you so much.
Jai, Gunamaya Mataji.
Hare Krishna, Prabhu, nice session. Prabhuji, just we were talking about that, you were saying about that, a person, he cannot be a guru, cannot be a father, cannot be a husband or a mother unless he is taking his dependence to a higher plane, in spirituality. Supposing that doesn't happen, It doesn't happen in most of our houses actually. So how do we take it like, how can we compromise on that project? This is question.
Okay, I could give the very hard philosophical Shastric answer from Chaitanya Mahaprabhu, or I can give the realistic answer. So, I don't remember the verse from Srimad Bhagavatam. Sorry, not Bhagavatam, from CC, but maybe somebody on the call knows. But there's a couple of verses in CC where Mahaprabhu is very strong, actually. He's saying that I think it's Mahaprabhu at least, but he's saying that if the husband is not spiritually competent, a wife should just reject him. You can take that approach if you want. I'm not suggesting it. No, okay. So see, all of us are put in a situation, right? Now, I think most of us, actually, I don't know, but I would say that some of us have probably come to spiritual life after marriage, right? And then it's like, okay, I've already got this baggage of being in a family where my husband, my wife, my children aren't Krishna conscious, and I'm trying to grow. But you could then see it as that's your preaching opportunity to them, not necessarily through words, but through behavior. Now, naturally, I can say this because everybody on this call, including me, is Asian by at least background. Asian mothers have a very strong way of dealing with kids when it comes to telling them off. I said it. You can chastise me afterwards. But you can see that as you grow in the process of Krishna consciousness, like the verse that I read from Bhagavad Gita 17:15, right? The austerity of speech. Slowly over time, as your character, as your behavior progresses and improves, your children will see, oh, hang on a second, I did this wrong thing. My mom would usually shout at me and do so much, hurt me so much, chastise me so much. I mean, it's coming from a place of love, but it's coming from a place of frustration. But here, she's not telling me off to the same degree anymore, but she's lovingly encouraging me on how I can be better as a person. And so through those activities, we can inspire and encourage those around us, not just children, but even husband, wife, or whoever, to come to a higher level of consciousness. They might not come to Krishna consciousness, but we should see that we've been placed in that situation to elevate their consciousness. Because just by elevating their consciousness, especially away from ignorance and passion, we're making them fertile to take on spiritual knowledge. The mode of goodness is a fertile ground for cultivating Krishna consciousness. So that's one part. The second part is that, again, unless we're born in a very strict devotional environment, we'll have friends, we'll have extended family who are not Krishna conscious. But it comes back to what we were talking about last week, which is that we should give our association, not take association. So knowingly, unknowingly, we took on the role of responsibility as a husband, as a mother, as a father. But now that we know there's the diamond of Krishna, now it's our duty that we try to whatever extent we can to give Krishna to others in whatever way they accept Krishna. It's not, here's a Bhagavad Gita, read it. It's, okay, you don't like reading or you feel like I'm being fanatical, etc., then just go through the love. Prasadam is always there. Cook, offer prasadam. Prasadam, I mean, Prabhupada always emphasized prasadam actually. So yeah, different ways. We just have to find ways to now realize that we've got this responsibility. We need to now take the responsibility and add some spiritual responsibility into it as well, to whatever degree we can. Okay. And Sima Mataji says about,
like we cannot force it down the throat. That's the one thing. Especially the spouse, it becomes you get the opposite reaction to it actually. So
yeah,
as long as we are allowed to do our thing, I think it should be slowly. So.
Oh, sorry, Mataji, I muted you because of the feedback. Yeah.
So that's what I think. I'm just thinking, So like you said, it's not as bad as it was before, but now I think he's okay. He's accepted it, kind of, but he wouldn't do anything. I mean, when we talk about the Vanaprastha, I don't want to get into the personal thing, but I'm saying when you think of this Vanaprastha point, so there comes the conflict, I feel. So where you need to really, it's more like we have a diverse. So we are very busy actually. Over the weekend, we have so many classes to do, but they don't have anything to do. So they basically want to go for movies or do something else where you really don't want to do it at this point of time. So, that conflict comes now and then, but I think now we slowly accepted it. So it should.
Yeah, it's acceptance on both sides. So I'm just going to mute you because of feedback. It's acceptance on both sides because we have to realize that we're taking a jump now, right? We used to be where they are, just like Yayāti and Devyani. We used to be at the same place. Yayāti's taken a jump. Devyani was intelligent, strong, and spiritually aware to also take the jump. But our spouse might not be. Most of the time they're not, because they see there's a change that's taking place. And people, I think it was Rashtra Mataji that mentioned, nobody likes change. But when we show that we're serious and sincere about this is not just a fanatical change of a couple of weeks, a month or so, but it's a longer term, we're actually serious about it, then they have two choices. They can keep rebuttaling their whole life, or they have to go, you know what, fine, let's go to the temple today. They have to come to that point eventually, because otherwise the relationship doesn't exist. But because we are cultured also, we try and avoid it going the other way, where it's like, okay, the relationship isn't working out, you your way, I my way. So we navigate it, and which is what you're doing perfectly nicely, which is that if they want to go to the cinema, of course we don't want to go, we try and avoid it, but we accept that, okay, this time we have to go. But slowly we can try and movies can be mode of ignorance, passion, or goodness, right? But the act of going to the movies, to the cinema, is quite passionate, because it's a passionate thing to do. So like this, we can go like, okay, what about instead of going to the movies, what if we go for a walk in the park? Stuff like that, like whatever the partner likes to do, but just try and elevate them to the goodness platform again. So then that way you're not exposing yourself to the modes of ignorance and passion, but you're giving them the time. Like, see, relationships, they just want time. They don't really care what we do. It's just that they're used to going to the cinema. They're used to going to the restaurants. So that's their mentality of what it means to spend time. But if you show you can spend time outside of the mode of ignorance and passion, then it might not be immediately accepted, but they'll see that there's their own consciousness allows them to be more open to doing these things eventually. And then Krishna will come in. Which leads me on to the, sorry, go ahead.
Yes, that's correct, Prabhuji. But fortunately, my daughter is also into this. So now, we have on Saturdays, we read Bhagavad Gita together because my daughter is on the call. So he likes to be with her. So that that's kind of a little bit improvement.
So this is,
as somebody said, mentioned that we just have to pray.
So this is Gunamaya Mataji's trick. If one devotee is enough, make sure there's two devotees in the house.
Yeah.
Yeah, no, that's nice. So
they accept better than the spouse, So I think that way there's no ego in that. That's good.
Yeah, that's good. It's good, which leads me on to one thing that I wanted to kind of share, just off of Sarika Mataji's last points as well. This mood of how we even have hopes, right? Because if Yayāti, Ajamil, etc. have hope. Now, I'm sure many of us on the call know the story of Shukdev Goswami, how he was an impersonalist, but he came back to who? Who did he come back to?
His father, Vyasadeva.
Who? Vyasadeva, right? Vyasadeva, the compiler of the literatures, he came back. He left Vyasadeva, because I don't want to be in Maya. But he came back. And what brought him back was not Vyasadeva, was not anything related to family life. It was 2 verses. One described the beautiful looks of Krishna, we could say. Yeah, how beautiful Krishna was externally. But the other verse is how beautiful Krishna is internally. And this verse, if I find it, yes, this one. Srimad Bhagavatam 3-23. Let me just put in chat. 3-23. Ahobakiyam, yes. Ahobakiyam stanakalakutam jigham sayapaya apyasadvi lebhe gatim dhatre chutam tatonyam kamva dayalum sharanam rajema. Now we know the pastime of Putana and how terrible Putana was. But translation goes, alas, how shall I take shelter of one more merciful than he, who granted the position of mother to a she-demon Putana, although she was unfaithful, and she prepared deadly poison to be sucked from her breast. Putana is the biggest example of how we can have faith, trust, and fully be convinced that I might, in my mentality, be the most sinful of all sinners. But Putana is guaranteed more sinful. And she didn't just get liberation, she got a position of a nurse, a mother in the spiritual world. So if she can attain the position of a mother, despite being so sinful, despite trying to kill Krishna, we're at least holding a bead bag and chanting, you know? Even if we're not chanting Krishna's names and we're just going Hare Krishna and looking at things here and there, we're still holding Krishna's names in the mood of not killing him, you know? So we definitely have hope of attaining something in the spiritual world. But we just have to be serious and sincere. Jay, any other comments, questions, chastisements, corrections? No? Okay, so much hope giving indeed.
Hare Krishna,
Okay,
Prabhu.
Hare Krishna, Suprabhu.
So it's as usual, it's a very nice, excellent class with practical, tips, practical realization. And also you're quoting like what you said, that when you were trying to answer Gunamai Mataji, you said you can give a Shastric hardcore and also the practical one. So both aspects you've covered in most part of this class, which is very nice. I mean, one thing you brought about is the lust, which I wanted to kind of highlight about it. Lust doesn't mean it's only the bodily need or like from a sexual point of view. It also means like, lust is there not at the body level, just not at the body level. It's there at the mind level. In the sense you need, respect, reverence. People should appreciate like how you see others. Like you say, you give an example of people having 4 cars. I try to compare, I should have 5th car or something like that. Right? So at every point we are lusty. It's not just only at the bodily, we want to do a sense gratificatory from a bodily point of view. So many different point of view. I mean, coming down to this, one of the Prabhujis here in Atlanta, USA, he's a disciple of His Holiness Radhanath Swami Maharaj. His name is, he's a doctor actually, Adigadadhar Prabhu actually. So he gave once a class in the Bhakti Temple in New York City. He gave how to deal with this lust aspect of it, how to curb it. So one thing he said is like, every day you chant in the Brahma Muhurta time. That's one aspect, he said, one solution. Second is, whatever you put in your mouth, it should only be Krishna Prasadam, offered to Krishna. Do not eat anything, because if you eat anything which is not offered, that will contaminate your consciousness. The third thing, it's not only what you put in your mouth, what you put in your eyes, in your ears, and in your mind. I mean, we are nowadays, like with the phone and other things, so much of information is coming into our mind. You have to control that. even if you're going to look at lusty pictures, so you don't have to go to a forest like an Ajamila to see those episodes, right? You can get it on demand. So you have to be conscious of that, cognizance of that. If you control them, if you kind of manage these three things, doing, Brahma Muhurta time chanting, and then what you consume orally and what you consume through the ears and other things, then you will make an improvement on those lusty aspects. I thought I'll share that. Thank you, Pravesh.
Yes, no, for sure, Prabhu. And yeah, if you could find the link and then share the class with me, then I can put it on the group as well. Or if you have a group, then you can put it on there. I think it'd be nice.
Yeah, he has given a class. Actually, I have to go and find out where it was. So let me find out. That's in fact, it's a pretty nice class to listen to. I'll try to find out. Sure.
Okay, thank you, Prabhu. And yeah, what is shared is actually just based on Vachuvegam Manasukrodha Vegam, that verse, because the whole idea is how to control the senses. So yeah, it's nice. So thank you for sharing.
Thank you.
Okay, if nothing else from anybody, then okay, I'm conscious of time actually, so I'm just gonna put these two in chat. But what I'm gonna say, so there were two questions I had. One is discuss other pastimes in which Shukracharya exercises his expertise in family affairs. And the second was discuss how husband and wife should help each other in coming closer to Krishna. So maybe if we just have one person share their reflection on the first question and one person on the second. Any volunteers? And yes, Subra Prabhu, I will share that on the WhatsApp group. Thank you for reminding me. So does anybody remember any pastime in which Shukracharya exercises his expertise in family affairs? Rachana
Hare
Mataji.
Krishna. Yes, I think in the Bali Maharaj episode, I guess he was the guru of Bali Maharaj. So he gave him the advice that, oh, how are you going to sustain yourself, and who's going to take care of your kingdom and your wealth and your everything if you're giving it all away to this Brahmana, So that was family advice given by Shukracharya.
Yeah, Shukracharya knew that it was the Lord Vishnu himself, but he tried to take Bali Maharaj away from performing the highest duty. Because if Bali Maharaj didn't sustain himself, then how would Shukracharya sustain himself? Because he was dependent on Bali Maharaj. So yes, that is one very, very prominent example of Shukracharya actually using his powers to try and influence material prosperity instead of spiritual prosperity. Thank you. Anybody like to share anything on how husband and wife should help each other in coming closer to Krishna? And this could be a devotee husband-wife. It could be maybe the husband's a devotee and the wife is not a devotee, or the other way around. Maybe a personal share on how you're trying to help your spouse come closer to Krishna at whatever stage they're at.
Prabhuji, I am actually trying my best actually. What we were doing, what I was doing wrong and what I'm doing right. I mean, I've been in this movement as an initiated devotee more than 15 years now. So it's been like up and down with my husband. I mean, he's not against it. He let me do whatever I want. And we don't, of course, we were vegetarian by birth, so that was an advantage. And then I stopped onion garlic. So all that, no problems at all. So all these things, no issues. But the thing is, then when we go too much into serving a lot, go to the temples or keep going every time, then I feel that he gets very annoyed, and it's kind of so. Now I have like an idea. Like I will not put things in his. I will not say you come, every time you come with me like that. So I'll just tell him, just drop me off and you do your thing. So just letting them to be what they want to do instead of forcing them. I think that would help. And eventually, as you said, that only prasadam is being served at home. So ensure that every single day they eat food cooked at home, not, because he always craves for outside food. And okay, once in a way we go to Govindas and monthly twice we go there. At least we, because he knows I don't eat anything else, so we go there. So this way, like, we make little compromise and feel that there is not so much against it. And in fact, he is, so the Bhagavad Gita reading has expanded to his friends as well. So his colleagues are also coming in. So there is one of his colleague who is really interested, that he comes, joins our chanting group in the morning at 4 in the morning. So, it's like, at least he's doing his part of telling that, this happens, why don't you join? So I seen that as one step ahead of the thing. But I feel that, like, most of them in this Kali Yuga, most of them have this spiritual laziness. It's not easy to be spiritual. I mean, we need to give in a lot. So the spiritual laziness is something that individual should realize and come out. It doesn't come out. It's not like just like weekly once get together. No, it's not like that. They should get that it should have a constant practice. So I don't know how that I will inculcate, but I think this, so far, it is the project is successful. I will not say. Krishna's mercy, it should think. Yeah. Thank you. That's all from my experience.
The project
Prabhuji,
of
can I just share a
Gunamai
point?
husband. Yeah, go ahead.
Yeah. So thank you, Gunamai Mataji, for sharing your experiences. I think they're very insightful. What I've noticed with my family also is that as the gap between a devotee and a non-devotee spouse increases, and the gap, I mean, is in terms of being material and being spiritual, it becomes harder for the other spouse to catch up. Uh, and I think for that spouse who is a devotee, it is very important to keep appreciating the non devotee spouse for whatever little effort they make towards that direction. Because we know that the non devotee spouse cannot perform spiritual activities or engage in devotional service. So it's very difficult for that spouse to reach that level of devotional service. So even if it is a very small thing that they do, which, like Gunmai Mataji so nicely gave an example, that he's mentioning to his friends that yes, there is chanting going on, so you can join the group. So I think giving them that little appreciation for whatever little effort they're making, they're going out of their comfort zone. I think that has worked a lot in my case, where I would appreciate every little thing that my husband would do. And gradually they feel that, okay, unless I chant those many rounds, you will not think that I've done good. Or unless I go to the temple, you don't think that I've made changes. But I think doing small changes on an everyday basis, appreciating that, will help them understand that we notice their mindfulness, and they're moving towards it. So I think that appreciation also goes a long way. Hari Bol.
Jay, no, thank you. And yeah, like, one common theme you can just see here is that often as devotees, we're like, oh, my spouse is pulling me into materialism. And we put our barriers up, right? We're like, I don't want to do it. But the same thing when we impose Krishna consciousness or spirituality on the husband or the wife, the spouse, they feel the same thing. So naturally they're going to put a barrier up. But yeah, if you work together, if you, as Sarika Mataji said, you're appreciating, you're encouraging them on the right path, then it just makes life so much nicer and better for both. Because then they're seeing that you don't, it has to be this, otherwise you're not a spiritual person. It's that do whatever you can, and it's nice to come along the way. So yeah, no, thank you for that, Sarika Mataji and Gunmai Mataji. But yeah, project husband going successful, I think, for both of them.
Prabhuji, apart from the husband, the family members also, like my father and my brothers, they are not devotees, but still they help me. They will not stop me doing anything. So they always encourage me for whatever I'm doing. And they even say that sometimes if I get angry, they said that you are doing so much of sadhana, you're doing mala, jap, and reading scriptures. You have to control it. You have to be like that. So they they will encourage me more. So we are blessed in this way that those who are on this call, few of their husbands are not devotees, but they are helping us. They're not stopping us. So in that way, we are blessed.
Yeah, no, thank you for that.
Okay, just one last point I want to say, like one of like my spiritual guide in ISKCON, I mean in this part. So she was taking a class. She told me that so whatever we considered as a blockage to our spiritual life, you know, somebody is opposing something, which is actually that is the impetus for us to improve. She's saying so. That is what I took that point very well. So this is the impetus. It shows me where is right, what is wrong. So I always get to choose what I'm supposed to do. So I think that that is one thing we learn when we have, you know, different personalities at home. So.
Yes, so if you get into any sort of marriage, or if you're encouraging your children to get married, then know that there'll be a full character circus at home, right? But no, it's an important point. Like often we see blockages as, oh, because of this I can't be spiritual, but actually because of that it's why you should be more spiritual. So yeah, no, it's a nice point. And we see that even Prabhupada appreciated the so-called non-devotee parents of his disciples so much, because if the so-called non-devotee parents didn't bring their children up, then how would Prabhupada have ever had disciples? So we can always appreciate, even if they don't do anything spiritual, we can appreciate that because of these personalities, I became a devotee today. Either because they gave birth to me, or there were situations that came up that, you know, weren't very favorable for me to think in a material ways, and therefore I was trying to find a way out of my situation, which encouraged me on the spiritual path, or whatever it is, you know. Family, friends, even those who are so-called enemies, we can appreciate them all because we see that they have made us a devotee today. Prayers of devotees and those around us who create the situation for us to turn to Krishna are both appreciable. So yes, thank you for your shares. And yeah, it's when we share like this that we can all take ideas and suggestions and thoughts about how we can become better devotees in our life as well. And that's the glory of sadhu sangha and association as well. So yes. Jay, any other final comments? No? Jay, in that case we can close. Thank you all for joining, and yes, let us remember this pastime of Yayāti and Devyani, and be like Devyani, who takes on all the spiritual wisdom, even if we're faced with somebody like Yayāti. Cough, cough, Sarika Mataji. No, but no. It's for all of us, because we all do it. We all feel like, who is this person to tell me this, you know? Children, some people on the street, anybody. Everybody can be our Shiksha Guru if we have the right mentality to take Shiksha. If we look at life just to take learnings, teachings, then we can be a true student of the Bhagavatam actually. So yes, thank you all. And yes, praying everybody has, I probably won't be giving class at least until after Jamashtami, so I pray everybody has a good, wonderful time serving in Jamashtami. But yes, Vanchakalpatarubhischa kripa sindhubheva patitanam pavnebhyo Vaishnavebhyo namo namah. Anant Koti Vaishnavrinda ki jai, Bhagavad Pravesh ki jai, Shukpad ki jai.
Thank you. Hare Krishna.
Hari Bol.
Krishna.
Much.
Hare Krishna.
Thank you.